Biden's a liar. He's a disgrace. He's a divisive figure. Biden wants racial division in the country. There's no other explanation for his constant use of identity politics, race-based narratives to divide the country and try to get all of us to hate one another. It's disgusting. It's one of the grossest things I've ever seen. Here's a video of Biden. He was speaking at a commemoration of the massacre in Tulsa. And instead of seeking to unite the country and celebrate the racial progress, dramatic racial progress we've made since that horrible incident, what does Biden do? He spins a yarn, a fairy tale, that the greatest threat to the country right now is most definitely white supremacy. There's a white supremacist around every corner. Check this out.
According to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
I want to take a pause and a deep breath a second just to ask a question and pose a question to the audience. Who actually believes that in the audience? The conservatives and Republicans and libertarians are smart, so I'll limit because I know you're the answer to the question. Of course you don't believe it because you're intelligent. But to the liberals who listen to my show, I know you're out there. I read your hate mail and your nasty social media posts. I see them all the time, so you're obviously listening to this. I don't know why I'd rather you. I don't know why you're here, why you're so obsessed with me and the show. It's quite bizarre. But you actually believe that? You really believe that white supremacists are the biggest threat to you? So you believe in the neighborhood you live in that there's a greater likelihood of a mass white supremacist attack in your neighborhood than there is from an ISIS or Al-Qaeda attack at some point in the future? What would you bet on that? If you were betting, would you bet your life on that? Of course you wouldn't. The problem with Joe Biden, who is unbelievably our commander-in-chief, I mean, one of the greatest buffoons in the history of politics, the problem with that is that's how allocation of resources is determined. Don't think for a second this is just a political speech. Joe Biden doesn't believe that. Joe Biden's lying to you. He knows he's lying. He's a disgraceful human being. But because of Joe Biden's lies and his need to instill the lie in the federal law enforcement infrastructure, when money and assets are allocated towards fighting a problem, Joe Biden is going to have those money and assets targeting white supremacists he believes are around every corner, while he believes we should subordinate the fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. You just heard it, folks. I'm not making it up. You just heard it. It's not my words. It's his. Are you willing to risk your life on the fact that Joe Biden has our FBI and counterterror infrastructure fighting the white supremacist he believes is around every corner, while telling them, hey, don't worry about ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Let's make them a second priority number 2 instead? You really believe that's going to make you safer? If you do, I'm sorry. You're really an imbecile. I'm really sorry. What is Joe Biden basing this on? He's basing it on our politicized now law enforcement upper echelon in the federal government, which is really, I'm very sorry, not all, but many of them have just totally disgraced themselves through the Spygate thing, the collusion hoax, the upper levels of the FBI, the upper levels of the DOJ. They become all politicians. Their allegiance to law and order has been subordinated to their allegiance to the liberal cause, and it's disgusting. Why do I bring that up? Because Biden's using a now thoroughly discredited DHS report to claim that there's a white supremacist around every corner coming for you and that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are second-rate threats to white supremacists. You doubt me? I don't put my website up a lot, but when I do, I need you to check out this story. It'll be in my show notes today, my newsletter, Bongino.com, or if you want to read the newsletter, Bongino.com/newsletter. By Matt Palumbo. Biden falsely claims white supremacist terrorism is a greater threat than ISIS and Al-Qaeda. How is he? Because you have to know how to diagnose the left's BS, ladies and gentlemen. See it, diagnose it, treat it right away. The diagnosis requires the symptoms. Where is he getting the symptoms from? Biden's claiming there's symptoms of this white supremacy everywhere. He's not just making it up. Where's he getting these numbers from? The narrative's made up. But where is he getting that from? Well, one of the tricks they do, the left, to make you believe that white supremacy, which is obviously repulsive, obviously, no one needs to say that on this show. We have to tell liberals that they're racist, but the non-racists, conservatives and Republicans who listen to my show don't need to be told that, of course. But if I'm going to allocate resources to a threat, I want to be damn well sure that that is the real threat. So how is Homeland Security and Joe Biden getting to this conclusion that white supremacy is a greater threat? Well, what they do is, watch this trick, watch this. They start the timeline for the body count right after 9/11. That's pretty convenient, isn't it? Think about it, right? You want to downplay ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He just did that, Biden. They play second fiddle to white supremacy. He just said it, right, folks? He just said, did I miss it? You want to play it again? He just said that. He needs data to advance this false narrative. So he says, guys, we're going to need body counts for white supremacist attacks to be higher. Someone probably came to him and Obama and said, listen, because Obama has thrown this out too, this kind of nonsense. They said, listen, thousands of Americans were killed on 9/11 by Islamic terrorists. So that body count is going to be high. We had the Pulse nightclub attack. We got to find a way to minimize that body count and maximize the white supremacist body count. You get it? You see what they did there? So someone in the room sits around the table and they said, I got an idea. How about we just start counting the day after 9/11? And someone was like, genius. That's absolutely genius. Matt Palumbo's all over it in this piece. Here's a screenshot from the piece. Whether it's white supremacists or Islamic extremists that are America's biggest terror threat determines what timeline you're looking at. Given that 9/11 resulted in more deaths than every white supremacist terror incident in the 21st century, combined by a country mile, it cannot possibly be the case that white supremacist terror is a greatest threat than Islamic terror overall. So how do you fix that? Just switch the timeline and start measuring Islamic terror attacks after 9/11 instead. Disgusting trick, right? Clever, but quite disgusting. But that's what they do because they want to lie to you. Don't count the bodies from 9/11. Let's start the day after. Even then, though, Homeland Security and others have issues getting the body count from white supremacist attacks to match the body count of Islamic terror attacks. So what do then? They just pick a very specific year and ignore the other ones. So not only they mess with the timelines, but they also classify it by attacks, not the number of people killed. White supremacists attack someone in prison, that's one attack. Islamic terrorist raids the Pulse nightclub, kills 49 people. That's one attack. One attack. 1 for 1 there. No, it's not 1 for 1. It's 49 for 1. Here, Matt covers this in the second part of this piece. You got to read this piece. It's in my newsletter today. Again, Bongino.com. Check it out. Here's the saying. Not the saying. Here's the line from the DHS report. American domestic violence extremists, racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically white supremacist extremists, will remain the most persistent and lethal threat to the homeland. That's the key passage from the DHS report. Nothing that from the 2018-2019 white supremacists conducted, noting that from 2018 to 2019, white supremacists conducted half of all lethal attacks, 8 total among domestic violent extremists, resulting in 39 out of 48 deaths from domestic extremism. For reference, the 2016 ISIS-inspired Pulse nightclub massacre alone killed 49 people, more than all white supremacists combined in 2018-2019. You see how they do that? Leave out 2016, measure 2018-2019. You see what they're doing? Instead of giving you a full scope and scale picture of the threat from white supremacy, which, again, obviously is repulsive and grotesque, instead of giving you a full scope perspective, here's the amount of attacks and deaths from white supremacist attacks, here's the amount of attacks and deaths from Islamic terror attacks. What do? They play down the Islamic terror attacks. Don't include 9/11. Leave out the Pulse nightclub. And they only measure a year where they can measure an increased level of white supremacist attacks to make it seem like it's a greater threat. It's not a non-threat, but they want to make it appear like a greater threat because they want to keep minority voters frightened. That's what they do. They are the party of racism, the left. They want to keep minority voters poor, and they want to keep minority voters frightened. And that is a fact. Let me get to my last part of the piece, and I got to move on. Biden said also, he said something else pretty disgusting during that speech. He said, quote, there were 37 members of the House of Representatives who were open members of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, that's fascinating because Biden failed to mention that most of them were Democrats. He also failed to mention, as I will now show you in a photo here, that Biden, there's a picture of Joe Biden. Do we need the Sharpie again? Let's do the Sharpie, folks. Here we go. There are some liberals listening. They'll have a hard time determining who Joe Biden is. They may never have seen him. There's a Sharpie. There's Joe Biden. What's Joe Biden doing there in that photo? What's he doing there? Any guesses? Any guesses, folks, what he's doing there? Oh, C-SPAN, too. What's that at the bottom? Oh, Robert Byrd's funeral. Robert Byrd, Ku Klux Klan member. Yeah, Joe Biden eulogizing him. Yeah, there it is, right there. Joe Biden eulogized a Klan member. He left that out. Fascinating. All right, let me get to my third sponsor. On the other side of this, I want to get to my rewriting history like magic section. Watch how everything we once thought under the Trump administration is now changed now that they did what they had to do. They got Trump out. So now the media all of a sudden is going to start to tell the truth now that there's no penalty to a Democrat.